They promised they'd be there. Those were the last words I remember hearing before I was wheeled into surgery, soft, reassuring, almost tender. My daughter held my hand. My son-in-law patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, Dad. We've got everything covered," they said. "You won't be alone." But when I woke up, groggy, confused, my chest stitched together like some grotesque jigsaw puzzle, I was alone. No one sat in the chair beside me. No one answered their phones. A nurse handed me a glass of water and said they tried calling my emergency contacts, but no one responded. The silence wasn't just in the room. It was in my chest. An aching void far deeper than the pain from the operation. I wasn't supposed to be alone. They said they'd take care of me. They left me. And in that sterile hospital bed, tethered to wires and heartbreak, something inside me cracked, not my body, but the part that still believed in them. My name is Richard Lawson. 62. Retired civil engineer. Widower. I wasn't always like this, frail and dependent. Just 5 years ago, I was hiking trails in Yosemite, sketching bridges I once helped build, and fixing my neighbor's roof just because I could. I lived in a modest home, one I built with my own hands, brick by brick after my wife passed. People respected me. My former coworkers, the young engineers I mentored, the barista at the cafe who always gave me a wink and an extra shot of espresso. I wasn't rich, but I lived well and with dignity. And I had my daughter Sarah. My only child. My pride. She married young, to a man named Daniel. Clean-cut, polite, maybe a bit too polished. He worked in finance, always spoke in numbers. I never quite warmed up to him, but Sarah was happy, at least I thought she was. After my stroke last year, everything changed. I couldn't manage the house. The bills piled up. Sarah and Daniel offered to move me closer to them, to take care of things. They insisted it was for my own good. I believed them. I gave them power of attorney. I signed the house over, trusting they'd do right by me. I gave them everything. The morning of the surgery, everything felt unnaturally calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. Sarah drove me to the hospital in silence, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, while Daniel is on phone call. I was too focused on the pressure building in my chest, not from fear of the operation, but from something deeper, something I couldn't name yet. We arrived early. The nurse led me through the usual rituals, gown, IV drip, paperwork. Sarah stood by my side, nodding, smiling with a tension in her face I hadn't noticed before. When the anesthesiologist entered, I turned to my daughter, searching her face for something, anything, that felt like comfort. "You'll be here when I wake up?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She reached for my hand. "Of course, Dad. We'll be right here." I wanted to believe her. I needed to. Those were the last words I remember before the lights dimmed and the anesthetic swept me into darkness. When I came to, everything was wrong. I blinked against the brightness of the recovery room. The air smelled of antiseptic and metal. My chest ached, wrapped tight in bandages and gauze. Tubes snaked out of my arms, machines beeped rhythmically at my bedside. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was absence. No Sarah. No Daniel. No familiar voice saying, "You're okay now." Just a nurse adjusting my IV. "Mr. Lawson," she said softly, "you're out of surgery. Everything went well." I blinked. "Where's my daughter?" She looked at the empty chair beside my bed. "No one's been here since we brought you in. We tried calling your emergency contact. No answer." I stared at her. That couldn't be right. There had to be some mistake. Sarah promised. I reached for the call button with trembling fingers and asked for my phone. When I finally got it, I saw missed calls from a pharmacy, a spam number, and nothing from Sarah. I dialed. Straight to voicemail. "Hi Sarah, it's Dad. I'm out of surgery. I'm okay. Just wondering where you are." I hung up. And waited. Minutes turned into hours. No call. No text. No knock on the door. Night fell, and I was still alone. By the second day, denial turned to dread. Still no Sarah. No Daniel. Not even a nurse relaying a message from them. Just silence. I called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I left messages, gentle at first, then firm, then pleading. I even asked the nurses to try. Same result. The social worker assigned to my case visited me in the late afternoon. Her name was N. Early 40s, kind face, firm voice. She walked in with a clipboard and empathy that felt almost too gentle. Mr. Lawson, she said, we've been trying to contact your daughter. We left multiple messages with both her and her husband. There's been no response. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. They must be busy, I whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it true, and didn't argue. Instead, she sat down. Can you tell me a little more about your living situation before the surgery? I told her everything. About giving up my house, the power of attorney, the arrangement that I would live with them after my stroke. I told her about Sarah, the little girl who used to curl up next to me after nightmares and call me her hero. Anne's jaw clenched ever so slightly. Would you be open to reviewing some financial documents with our team? Why? I asked. Because, she said carefully, we need to ensure you're not being financially exploited. What you've described, it raises concerns. I nodded. Numb. Ashamed. Still not ready to accept what I already feared. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The question ringing louder than ever, did they really abandon me? 3 days later, I had my answer. And returned with a man named Jason, a legal volunteer from an elder rights group. He was young, smart, and visibly angry on my behalf. We accessed public records, he said. The house you owned? Sold. The proceeds went into a joint account under Sarah and Daniel's names. But I didn't. My mouth went dry. I never agreed to that. You gave them power of attorney. Legally, it allowed them to make financial decisions for you. I closed my eyes. And your pension account, Jason continued, has been drained over the last 8 months. Withdrawals listed as care services and medical transfers, but we can't trace any of that money to actual expenses related to your care. It felt like the floor dropped beneath me. They hadn't just left me in a hospital bed. They had looted everything I'd worked for. My wife's savings. My retirement. My future. Jason offered me options: legal action, public advocacy, reclaiming control. But I couldn't hear him. All I could think about was the moment Sarah promised she'd protect me. And how I believed her. Anger came in waves. One moment I was grieving the loss of trust, and the next I wanted to see them suffer, to feel the humiliation, the loneliness, the fear I now carried like a second skin. I stopped eating. I refused visitors. I stared out the window for hours, rehearsing what I'd say if I ever saw Sarah again. But even in my rage, there was another feeling gnawing at me. Shame. Shame that I didn't question more. That I let Daniel speak over me. That I mistook silence for support. That I chose to believe in love, even when it started to feel conditional. The other residents at the assisted facility thought I was just a quiet man recovering from surgery. But inside, I was unraveling. I'd never felt more alone. Until Rebecca arrived. She was a new caseworker, smart, blunt, and unwilling to let me sink into despair. She saw right through me. You can let this rot you, she said one afternoon. Or you can fight to reclaim what's yours, not for revenge, but for yourself. That night I didn't sleep. I wrote down everything I remembered. Every signature I gave. Every conversation. Every hesitation I should have listened to. And then I began planning, not to destroy but to rise. The first step was simple: revoke the power of attorney. Rebecca helped me file the forms. The lawyer filed an emergency court order to freeze what little remained in the accounts. We were able to trace a small portion of money untouched, enough to pay for my care at the facility for a few more months. But the financial recovery was only part of it. The real battle was internal. Each day, I pushed myself. I walked the halls. I joined a therapy group. I even started painting, a hobby I'd abandoned after my wife passed. For the first time since the surgery, I felt like a person again. A man, not a victim. One morning, I passed the bulletin board and saw a flyer. Family Rebuilding Group, Tuesdays at 3 p.m. I signed up. Not because I believed my family could be rebuilt, but because I still needed to believe I could. 2 weeks later, I saw my house. Rebecca drove me past it as a favor. I didn't ask to stop, I just needed to see it. Fresh paint. New shutters. Trimmed lawn. It was beautiful. Unrecognizable. A for sale sign sat proudly in the yard. It was like I'd never existed. No trace of the tree I planted for Sarah's 7th birthday. No wind chimes my wife hung on the porch. No memories. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears had dried out long ago. Instead, I made a vow. They may have taken my home, my money, my trust, but they wouldn't take my story. I started writing to Sarah. Not to guilt her. Not even to demand answers. But to remind her of who I was. Who we were. I filled pages, some angry, some tender. I described memories I knew she'd forgotten. I told her how it felt to wake up alone. How silence became the cruelest sound of all. I wrote and rewrote the final page more than a dozen times. Each version ended differently. Some with heartbreak, others with hope. But all of them held the same truth: I still loved her. And that was the hardest part. Love doesn't just die. Even when it's buried beneath betrayal. I never mailed the letter. But writing it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. She came without warning. One afternoon, I wheeled myself into the courtyard and there she was, standing by the fountain, hands clenched, eyes red. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I just watched her. Studied the way guilt weighed on her shoulders. She sat down beside me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything." I looked away. "Daniel told me we'd fix it later," she continued. "That you'd understand. But you left me," I said, voice even. "You made a promise. You broke it." She nodded. "I know." There was a long pause. No excuses. No justifications. Only the sound of her breathing. "I want to make it right," she said. "Then start by showing up." She did. Sarah visited every few days. She brought old photos, stories, awkward apologies. We talked, sometimes in long silences, sometimes in raw honesty. She told me how scared she was, of losing her home, of disappointing Daniel, of not knowing how to care for me the way I cared for her. "I was drowning," she admitted. "And I let him pull me under. But you didn't reach for me," I said. "You climbed over me." Her tears came freely then. "I wish I could undo it." "I don't need you to," I replied. "I just need you to own it." She did. Bit by bit, she started taking accountability, not just in words, but in actions. When she brought the photo, her on my shoulders at the beach, I knew something had changed. She wasn't just visiting out of guilt. She was remembering who she was. Who we were. She filed for separation from Daniel quietly. Told me she started therapy. Began helping at the facility. Volunteered to sit with residents whose families never came. She was trying. And for the first time, I wasn't just the man she betrayed. I was the man she was trying to become worthy of again. Daniel came reluctantly. The moment he stepped into the room, the tension was thick. He sat across from me, arms folded like a fortress. I said everything I needed to, without shouting, without breaking down. I told him how he'd twisted Sarah's fears. How he'd robbed me while pretending to help. He deflected. Minimized. But I saw it in his eyes, he knew. When I said I wouldn't sue, he scoffed. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it for me. I let go, not because he deserved it, but because I wouldn't let him live rent-free in my soul. He left. And I felt lighter. Healing isn't neat. There are still days I feel the sting. Nights I wonder what might have been. But they no longer own me. Sarah visits weekly. She brings books now. We sit and read like we used to when she was a child. We don't talk about forgiveness. We live it. One moment at a time. And that, I've learned, is the most powerful form of justice there is.